The words evil and monster are insufficient to describe a dangerous predator capable of sinking to the depths of depravity that this man did. Those were the unflattering remarks from the judge who sentenced Angus Sinclair for the murders of teenagers Christine Eadie and Helen Scott. It had taken 37 years and a change to Scotland's double jeopardy law before the killer was brought to justice for these two murders. But the Glasgow-born painter and decorator had killed before. He would lure girls as young as 6 into his house, then rape and sexually assault them. The mystery attacker would always grab his victims from behind so they were never able to see his face. Sometimes the predator would strike twice on the same day. Since his reign of terror began in 1978, he'd claimed at least 10 victims, but more were to follow. That year, every police officer in the city was on the lookout for the monster who showed no mercy or pity for his victims. Appeals had been made in the press and a photo fit of their suspect had been issued as the attacks mounted. Angus Robertson Sinclair is the man believed to be the perpetrator. He was a Scottish serial killer and child molester responsible for many infamous tragedies that occurred in Glasgow in the 20th century. Without any further ado, let's get into today's video. Sinclair's first brush with the law came in 1959 when he was just 13 years old. An ungodly start to his career in crime saw him stealing from a Glasgow church, and many more petty crimes led him to a housebreaking charge. He received 12 months probation for the crimes, but these would be mild compared to his crimes that were to follow. In 1961, at just 16 years old, Sinclair's life of crime took a dark twist when he was found guilty of lewd behaviour against an 8-year-old girl, which he was given 3 years probation for. But just 7 months into that, his career of killing quickly took off. Catherine Rehill was 8 years old in 1961 when Sinclair sexually assaulted and strangled her at his home. He threw her body down a stairwell and told the little girl's mother that the death had been an accident. This was the first of many twisted crimes he would commit. An autopsy determined that she had been and strangled, but police were unable to prove Sinclair killed her or get him to confess. Eventually, Sinclair's brother John convinced him to confess Rehill's murder. A psychiatrist deemed him obsessed with sex and declared that he would reoffend if released. Despite this, Sinclair was only sentenced to 10 years detention as he was a minor at just 16. He ended up serving 6 years before he was released. He went on to become a decorator and moved to Edinburgh to start a new life with his family. Believe me when I say they should have listened to that psychiatrist, because just 7 years after his release, he went on a murderous run, taking the lives of 8 known victims over a 2-year stint. On the 15th of October 1977, two 17-year-old girls, Christine Eadie and Helen Scott, were seen leaving the World's End pub in Edinburgh, and that was the last time they were seen alive. The following day, Eadie's body was found on a hill in Lothian, and Scott's body was found in a cornfield 6 miles away. Both had been beaten, gagged, tied up, and strangled. Several witnesses say they had seen the girls talking with 2 men after leaving the pub, but neither were identified. Despite an extensive investigation with a list of around 500 suspects gathered, detectives were unable to say who the two men were. Lothian and Borders Police scaled down the investigation in May 1978, meaning Christine and Helen's families were left without answers. Around the same time, a series of similar murders occurred across Scotland. Francis Baker, Hilda McCauley, Agnes Cooney and Anna Kenny were abducted, bound and gagged with items of clothing and strangled before being dumped on a deserted farmland. Police did not connect these murders to the World End murders and wrongfully convicted another sex offender operating during those times called Thomas Ross Young. Although there's nothing I'd like to see more than a sex offender spend the rest of their life in prison, they seemed to have missed one, a mistake that Scotland would pay for dearly over the years to come. The hunt for the killers became one of the biggest manhunts Scotland had ever seen, as fear gripped the nation and the press began to link the murders of Christine and Helen with the other unsolved killings in Glasgow. Despite the deep similarities across the cases, by the end of the 70s, the investigation into the World's End case had gone cold, and it seemed like Angus Sinclair and his accomplice had escaped justice. In the meantime, they both remained at large. Just a year later in 1978, Sinclair abducted 17-year-old Maria Gallacher in Glasgow. He raped her and stabbed her in the throat. This time, a witness saw him abducting Gallacher. While the witness was unable to identify him, Sinclair was worried he would get caught if he killed again, and decided to tweak his tactics, or more specifically, his choice of victim. His twisted idea was to target children because they were more vulnerable and easily manipulated. Between 1978 and 1982, he raped countless children across Glasgow, breaking the hearts of families across the city. The method of assault followed the same pattern of luring them into his house and raping them at knife point before releasing them and changing their innocent lives forever. Evidence gathering techniques in the 1970s weren't advanced enough to allow the police to track down the killer. In 1982, Sinclair was arrested for molesting children, which at the time was totally disconnected to the murders occurring around Glasgow. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 19 years. As time went on, DNA advanced and police hadn't forgot about their suspicions all those years ago. As he came up for parole in 2001, he was linked by DNA analysis to the rape and murder of Mary Gallacher. He was convicted and received another life sentence. Things didn't get better for Sinclair, because in 2003, a cold case review of the World's End murders led to a new DNA testing of the semen found on the two bodies. It was a partial match for over 200 recorded profiles, including Sinclair. From witness accounts, 2 people had been involved, hence there were 2 people's DNA samples, which added a layer of complexity in the testing. Sinclair was required to provide a sample which was matched to the sample from the murders. In a shocking twist, they found another match, Angus Sinclair's accomplice. It turns out that the man who had helped him kill those 2 teenagers was none other than Sinclair's brother-in-law, Gordon Hamilton. Unfortunately, he could not be charged as he died in 1996, just a few years before the shocking discovery. Police did attempt to do testing for the other 1977 murders, but all the evidence had been lost and they could only proceed with the World's End murders. Eventually, Sinclair's lawyers submitted a no case to answer request based on the lack of evidence Sinclair had not had consensual sex with the victim. Lord Justice Clark upheld the submission and, in a painful twist, formally acquitted Sinclair, and he was not charged with the murders. In 2012, a year after the United Kingdom eliminated double jeopardy for murder cases, the World's End murders were reopened. This was the only thing stopping Sinclair from being prosecuted. On the 13th of October 2014, 37 years after the murders, Angus Sinclair was brought to trial for the second time. This time, his prior convictions for Catherine Rehill and Mary Gallagher's murder was submitted as evidence to prove that the sex with the victims was likely non-consensual. Then finally, on October 14th, Sinclair was convicted of the murders. He received a third life sentence but later died at HMP Glenachill. His DNA and that of his dead brother-in-law, Gordon Hamilton, was found on a semen stain taken from Helen Scott's coat. Scottish police had planned to charge Sinclair with all 6 1977 murders, but all the evidence from the unsolved Glasgow murders had been lost over time, and if you remember, they also had a problem that someone was already in prison for the murder of Francis Baker, the first sequence from 1977, and he had been incarcerated for almost 30 years. Thomas Ross Young continued to plead his innocence until his death in July 2014. Unfortunately, it was too late for the police to rectify the mistake they had made. A change in the law on double jeopardy, the rule that meant a person could not be tried twice for the same crime, saw Sinclair become the first in Scotland to be given a second trial. No one was ever charged with the murders of Angus Cooney, Hilda McCauley, and Anna Kenny, but based on the murders Angus Sinclair was convicted of, it wouldn't be far-fetched to say that he was guilty of these also. That's it for today's video. I hope you found it interesting. This, unfortunately, is a case that slipped mainstream media and isn't known by many people. If you have any suggestions on other cases that have gone unknown, please let me know in the comments down below and I will cover the most 3 liked. Subscribe to the channel because there's always something new to see here every day. And hopefully, I'll see you all in the next one.